What is going on, YouTube? This is Asteroid. So I'm going to review Eazy-E's second EP, and this project is called It's on Dr. Dre 187um Killa. Now, this project came out in late 1993. It was kind of a response to Dr. Dre after his series of disses on his The Chronic album from 1992. And basically, the backdrop on that is Dr. Dre was unhappy with the way Eazy-E was kind of running Ruthless Records with Jerry Heller back in the 90s, so the early 90s. So he broke away from the group N.w.a. and formed Death Row with Suge Knight, and then upon doing that, Dr. Dre also found Snoop Dogg, dropped a solo album in The Chronic, and dissed Eazy-E a few times on The Chronic, particularly on the song Fuck with Dre Day. So Eazy-E eventually caught wind of the diss songs and the music video that dissed Eazy-E a bunch and made this response project, and this is the project of that. So particularly, there's a song on here, "Real Motherfucking G's," which like I don't know if it's like double XL, but there's like some hip hop websites or hip hop type articles that have said that "Real Motherfucking G's" is like the number 1 diss song of all time, at least in rap music. And I kind of feel like the concept behind that, it is definitely a powerful diss. I would say that there's probably some better disses, but I do think this is a pretty elegant one. This definitely has a lot of grace and is a pretty nice kind of response to like the song that Dr. Dre dissed Easy, which is "Fuck with Dre Day," the second single off the Chronic. So it's the same kind of vibe towards it. Eazy-E adopts a different style on this album. Like this is very much G-Funk, which even though Eazy-E was kind of beefing with Dr. Dre around this time, it is at least good that Eazy-E adapted to the G-Funk style that Dr. Dre had helped helm between like his between n.w.a.'s 91 album Niggas for Life and then the 92 album by Dr. Dre, The Chronic. Those were both 2 albums that helped usher in G-Funk throughout the 90s and rap music and that type of stuff. But it's just good to see that Eazy-E was not doing kind of like the stark kind of static boom bap type music that most of rap that wasn't G-Funk was kind of doing around the time. So it's just good to kind of get that. And this was like the real last project that Eazy-E put out, apart from Straight Off the Streets of Motherfucking Compton and then the Bone Thugs and Harmony EP, Creeping on a Come Up. So this was the last thing that Eazy-E did before working with Bone Thugs. And it's just kind of interesting because this is quite the quality project. I definitely have to say this project packs quite a bit of punch. Like most of the songs on here are pretty damn good, and for an EP, that really says something. That the vast majority of the songs, 3/4 of this project, in my opinion, kicks a lot of ass. It just really has that quality down. I do kind of feel like I would have liked maybe like a club song on here or something like that, but then I kind of feel like Still a Nigga kind of covers that territory in a lot of ways. But it does have like a pretty rock solid veneer towards it that just kind of gives it some pretty quality edge. And I just would have to say Real Motherfucking G's is a great single and a nice taste of West Coast that's not from Dr. Dre's angle to kind of see what other giants from that area were up to. And then the follow-up single, Any Last Words, is kind of a creepy, almost horrorcore kind of song also. It's kind of just Eazy-E more on his gun type stuff that he had like an affinity for back in the day. So that's just kind of the thing. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the single. So the first single is Real Motherfucking G's, and this is like very similar to Nothing But a G Thing. Has a similar type production to Nothing But a G Thing. It's just kind of a more leery, a little bit more kind of glaring kind of song than Nothing But a G Thing. I feel like the beat on Nothing But a G Thing is probably ultimately better, but this is still a nice kind of pseudo kind of sarcastic response in the production to what Dr. Dre was kind of doing. So it's just interesting to kind of get that. And I do feel like this is a pretty quality diss song. Eazy-E brings 2 cats on here. One is BG Knockout, and then Dresta is the other one. Dresta is the person who does the second verse. BG Knockout does the third verse, and then Eazy-E does verse 1 and verse 4. So that just kind of happens to be a thing. But the quality of this is pretty good. I do feel like these are some pretty scathing disses to Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. Just being able to talk about how Dr. Dre was kind of in like mascara and that type stuff, and the fact that Death Row, like it was, I found it interesting that Eazy-E knew up front that Death Row was kind of treating Dr. Dre badly. So apparently Death Row was kind of not a good place even in 92 when Dr. Dre was flagship behind that brand and stuff. I didn't know that had happened in 93. So it's interesting to kind of get that. And Eazy-E also talks about how Dr. Dre got arrested for assaulting D Barnes back in '91. So there's just a number of scathing disses towards Dr. Dre, and I feel like this is because Eazy-E was a giant as much as Dr. Dre around the time. He's probably one of the few that could probably have the quality to be able to diss Dr. Dre like that and have it be cogent. I think that's just kind of the concept. It's this quality that sort of stuff happens. And the Snoop Dogg disses are pretty good also. It's just, I like the concept of seeing what Eazy-E kind of thought of Snoop Dogg just because of how large Snoop Dogg is today, just to kind of see the initial thoughts of what Eazy-E, someone who's no longer here, is deceased, has kind of thought of Snoop Dogg, especially back in like the 92, 93 days when he was still Snoop Doggy Dogg. So it's kind of interesting to kind of get that. The second single is Any Last Words, and this one's kind of a pseudo club cut. I mean, it kind of has like this haunting kind of late at night, especially for early '90s kind of feel. I mean, this one's not quite as G-funk as Real Motherfucking G's, but it does kind of have like a nice kind of funk type bop to it. Kind of feels like a Parliament kind of bop. Not maybe not entirely Parliament, but just something more funkadelic and that type of stuff. This is kind of, I mean, it's haunting in a way. It's kind of mid horrorcore, maybe something that Esham would do, but it just kind of feels nice to kind of get that, because I think Eazy-E probably would have eventually done horrorcore had he been alive to kind of do it. But this is just kind of like a spooky kind of shoot 'em up kind of song, and Eazy-E's fantasies of being manic personality and that type of stuff. It just kind of works in that sense. It's kind of a nice one. It's just a haunting kind of like shock of a song and that sort of thing. And Cocaine has a nice hook on here. I didn't realize he had been doing hooks that far back and that he even knew Eazy-E, but that's pretty interesting. So, yeah, two quality songs. Just a real kind of haunting. Any Last Words is just kind of a haunting, but still kind of funky, kind of club type bop in like a mild sense. But I feel like the best club cut on here is probably still a nigga. But we'll go ahead and talk about these. So that's kind of the concept. So out of 8 songs on here, I'm going to wind up recommending to you 6 of them. So the only 2 songs I don't recommend would just be Boys in the Hood G Mix and then Down to the Last Roach, which the reason why I didn't like Down to the Last Roach is just because it wasn't much of a song. It was just kind of like, I mean, the beat was okay. I think this would have been a nice one, a nice kind of grimy kind of beat had it just had a little bit better raps in here and just a little bit been a shorter song and something more tight and put together better. It just felt like a kind of loose, kind of just ad lib kind of song more than anything. It just did not have like tight kind of, yeah, I felt like Down to the Last Roach was just kind of a it was just kind of a loose song that just didn't have the packaging correctly for what it needed to be. It just was kind of a benign song and just did not have like the emphasis that it probably needed to. And I also feel like Boys in the Hood, the G Mix, it's nice that Eazy can still rap that song pretty well, but it just did not have a very good production on here. It's another lengthy kind of song. I do like the song Boys in the Hood in some cases, but I just feel like the beat that they gave this, the G Mix, was just not very G in my opinion. I just felt like this was not that solid a beat, and it kind of detracts from the rest of the project. But those are the only 2 duds of songs. The first 6 songs that you hear are all great songs. Like, to talk about some more of these, like Extra Special Thanks, I really kind of like the kind of circus-like beat of this song. This has like a real leery and kind of sarcastic kind of tone towards it, and I like Eazy-E's actually kind of funny on this one, even though it's only a minute long. That's just a nice one there. Still a Nigga is a pretty dope club cut. This is definitely has an excellent beat. It's a real kind of hollow and scaping kind of club cut that this is really leery and kind of glaring in a lot of ways. This is probably one of the few songs that this is kind of not has some diss song in mind or some sort of violent aspect in mind. But I kind of like the concept of it just being like a pretty ready to go club cut in a lot of ways. It's just interesting that this crafted so well. This is just an excellent beat. Give Me That Nuts, of course, a nice sexual song just for like stepping out and getting laid and that type stuff. Definitely is a pretty manic type song. It's just Eazy-E on his kind of salacious type stuff in a lot of ways, but it's just so infectious. This one is just really kind of addictive. It's just a nice little appetizer of a song. It's really kind of like that voracious kind of energy that works, and it's pretty infectious. I really kind of like the summery kind of springish kind of beat on there. This is really kind of like a nice kind of Give Me That Night's just a nice kind of balmy kind of beat, and then It's On is like another diss song towards Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and I just would have to say that this one is kind of a little bit more leery, not quite as much of single ready as Real Motherfucking G's, but I feel like it works for its status just to kind of say in case Dr. Dre wanted to take it another step further, Eazy has some more ammo for that sort of thing. It's just kind of a nice This one Eazy-E does by himself, and actually has some pretty solid disses towards the both of them, just knocking both of them out in that kind of context. So I feel like both of these disses are pretty good. They just work as like a nice context. It's kind of a more leery kind of song, just kind of glaring of a song, and just feels like another G-funk type tune, but it just works as that kind of has like a nice veneer towards it. So me liking 6 out of 8 songs on here, I'm gonna go ahead and score this EP like an 8.5 out of 10. I feel like that's solid enough. Me not liking 2 songs out of 8, but I just feel like these 2 songs, because there's only 7 songs on here. I feel like because there's only 7 songs on here, and I really only like 5 of those 7 songs, I feel like that's kind of a little bit shortchanged. But I do like the intro, so I added that to the score. So I just kind of feel like, but Boys in the Hood was kind of a disappointment, and then Down to the Last Roach could have been good if it would have been shortened and they would have actually rapped better on there. I just would have felt like that would have been a lot more executed, but it did have a good beat ultimately, but it's just not one I would listen to. It's just almost 8 minutes and just did not have a good compactness towards it. But 8.5 out of 10, that's still pretty rock solid. Definitely one of Eazy-E's greater works. If I would say for folks who are new to Eazy-E, this is probably one of the most approachable. This has the most glossy of productions, about as recent as he got in terms of quality that he did in his lifetime. It's just something to really note on that. And the social score, I would probably give this like a 7 out of 10, because I do feel like Real Motherfucking G's, Still a Nigga, some of these songs do have some kind of emphasis, but there's just not a lot of palatable topic matter. I think that that's just kind of the concept. You've got kind of a shock value song, 2 diss songs, a sex song, and then like 1 club song, and then that about takes care of it. And it's just kind of very brief and to the point. And there's just not a lot of topical palette to really go with to kind of see what else Eazy-E was up to around this time, considering that he hadn't dropped an album since 1988. I mean, he dropped an EP in 92, which I reviewed on this channel, but apart from that, he just was really not doing much. I guess he did do the n.w.a 91 album. That's just kind of the thing there. So yeah, that's kind of the concept. So 8 out of 10. Really, there's not much of a future just because Eazy-E is deceased, but I will say I'm going to review some more of these Eazy-E projects, so we'll kind of get to some of those.